The sound it's not. It's good. Do you hear me? No. In the speakers, do you hear me in the speakers in the room? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we will start today with a long day because it's a day of energy industry, just transition and indigenous people. So we'll try also win this panel in the Portuguese pavilion to tackle all these themes. And I will start to give you a summary of this panel. This initiative, this panel, have the aims to leverage an informed discussion on the critical raw materials value chain as a strategic importance of energy transition for a safer, fair, and sustainable planet. These topics related with mitigation process and climate adaptation in the energy sector as a necessary aspect of the climate transition that deserves a debate here in the COP28 at Portugal Pavilion. So I will start to call our panelists of this debate, and we'll start after a keynote speaker from Alexandra Kazmierska, Kamiarczak, from European Environment Agency that I will invite to sit here already in the floor. It's from the Climate Change and Human Health Unit. I'll also invite Tiago Brandão Rodrigues, the Portuguese, from the Portuguese Parliament. It's President of Environment and Energy Commission. Then I will introduce with a short view each one. And I will also like to invite Teresa Ponce de Leão. It's president of the Energy and Geology Portuguese Laboratory. Jerónimo Cunha, it's General Director of Energy Geology Portuguese Authority. And Dina Story from Marfa Advisors and Partner Strategy in Middle East. And it's a very known speaker also here in Dubai. Thank you, all of you, to accept our invitation. I will begin with a short video. Also, it's the image normally talks for itself, so I think that could be a nice to have this frame with this video. So thank you very much again. I will invite for this keynote speaker, Alexandra Kazmierska. is working in the Climate Impacts and Adaptation Group at the European Environment Agency. She currently coordinates the European Climate and Health Observatory and holds the position of an expert in climate change and human health. She has a long experience in adaptation to climate change, in particular in relation to urban settings. Before joining EEA in 2017, Alexandra carried out research at University of Manchester and Cardiff University in UK. Thanks again.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and many thanks to Portugal for the invitation to the event. As you can see from my job title, I'm not really an expert in raw materials, but I will do my best to represent the knowledge of the European Environment Agency here. So I would like to talk about both the climate impacts and climate risks associated with raw materials extraction and production in Europe. Just to say that the organization that I work with is an independent agency of the European Union, and our job is to collect the environmental information from the member states and other countries that we are collaborating with, repackage it so that the policymakers and the decision makers can make informed decisions based on this knowledge. So I'll be talking very much from the European perspective. And in Europe, we've made really a very great progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, on reducing energy consumption, and also on increasing the renewable energy share. We have reduced the greenhouse gas emissions by 31% since 1990, but to reach the net zero, we still need to reduce them by following 70%, and we have only 28 years to do that, so we really need to speed up the rate of action. What can be really helpful is increasing the share of renewable energy. At the moment it's at 22.5%. We are aiming at 42.5% in 2030. Indeed, the energy transition to renewables is gaining momentum. It has doubled since 2005, and we've seen an exponential growth in the deployment of wind and solar energy, but also in electric car sales, from 3% of the new car registrations in 2019 to 22% of new car registrations in 2022. So you can see the sort of the rate and speed at which this transition is going. But to be able to do that, we actually need a lot of raw materials. A recent study from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission is projecting that the demand for lithium will grow by 11 times by 2030 and 21 times by 2050. A couple of days ago, there was a report released that is stating that the European car makers actually only managed to secure 16% of the lithium that they will need in 2030 to meet the demand for the cars. We see a similar growth in demand for the raw earth materials by 2050 to produce wind turbines. And we know that within the European Union, our share of production of raw materials is only in single digits when it comes to percentages, and we rely a lot on imports. But actually also looking at the climate impacts of the raw material extraction and processing, altogether it amounts to about 18% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the European Union. And the European Environment Agency recently had a report looking at how to improve the climate impacts in raw material production, for example, by implementing more life cycle assessments, improving the resource and energy efficiency, relying yet more on renewable energy sources, but also the use of secondary raw materials. Then technology used in clean energy is really progressing at a very fast speed, and it's projected that by 2030 the amount of waste from wind turbines, photovoltaics and electric car batteries will increase 30 times. So it's a lot of waste, but at the same time it's a very big resource. And according to one of the latest reports from the European Environment Agency, we can actually recycle 90% of the material used for wind energy production, 95% of photovoltaics, and 100% of the batteries that are used in electric cars. It's not without its challenges, but we can use it as a resource rather than waste to obtain the raw materials. It's even more important given the climate risks to our supply chains, to the materials that are coming from outside of Europe. In April next year, we will be issuing a big report called the European Climate Risk Assessment. It's a study done with the European Commission, which is looking at climate risks to a variety of sectors, and also the responsibility of various actors to address those risks. One of the risks assessed is the risk of climate change happening overseas and how it might affect the supply of raw materials to European Union. And as you can see, it's actually in red, so in both the midterm and in the far future, the risk of securing this stable supply is quite high if let's say there is a big flooding in China happening that might disrupt this. But also in Europe, we are not immune to the climate risks to raw material extraction and processing. What you see on the screen is just a very quick and dirty analysis of some industrial facilities that are reporting on the emission to the European Union. And overlaying them with the flood risk areas, we can see that a substantial proportion of, for example, open cast mining and quarrying or the installation for processing of metals are located in flood risk areas. What we are also doing at the agency is collecting examples of good practices, how climate adaptation is being done in various sectors. So we have, for example, examples of how ex-mining areas are being used for climate adaptation to reduce the risk of flooding in our Climate Adapt platform. And I would like to encourage the audience to send us any ideas for good practices that you see in your sector, in your activities, that we could put online and allow others to learn from. The final thing I would like to mention that maybe it's a bit overlooked sometimes in the discussion about the climate risks to various industries, the risk to people who are working. And a couple of days ago, we had the first ever health day at COP, acknowledging the risks to human health from climate change. And the risks are really great to the people working in highly exposed jobs in agriculture, forestry, in construction, but also, for example, in mining. Working in very hot conditions is dangerous to human health, but it also affects the speed at which people are working, how many breaks they need to take, and so on. So we've seen that the overall productivity of people have been falling because of the increase in heat waves, increase in temperatures, and on average it's about 16 hours per year per working lost annually due to increasing temperatures. And when you sort of multiply it by the 380,000 people employed in the mining and quarrying sector across Europe, that really amounts to a considerable loss of working time. We have some examples within the European Climate and Health Observatory, but in the agriculture sector, how the health of workers can be protected in highly exposed jobs. But if you can come up with examples from the mining sectors and help them share them with others, that would be equally great. So with this, I will finish and pass on back to Georges and the remaining speakers. Thank you very much.
Very much, Alexander. So I will invite you to take your seat. And I can already give also information that you have to leave us before and because you have another a presentation in the other pavilion. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot also to participate now in our debate. With rapidly, very quickly, I would like to introduce more detailed each panel in each panelist in our debate now. So I will start from left to right. So Dina Story is a climate change and sustainability subject matter expert and executive advisor to several global organizations with governments, NGO, and private sector, with over 18 years of experience. Dina is currently a senior partner with Marfa Advisor, focusing on delivering projects in sustainable finance mechanism. She's also served as a senior director in United Arab Emirates Independent Climate Change Accelerators, and was the AESG Sustainability Partner with PwC. And she's have a long curriculum. So, and to be shorter, Dina was the Director of Sustainability Operation in Expo 2020 Dubai. So thank you, Dina, to be here also. Jerónimo Cunha, as already said, is General Director of Energy and Geology Authority, and it's electrical engineering by training. 15 years of experience in energy sector with a focus on public policies. Worked at FASEC, GAG, ADEN, Ministry of Environment and Climate Action, and in Ernst and Young Advisors. Teresa Ponce de Leão have a PhD from Porto University in energy planning with renewable integration, professor in the same university, and president of the board of directors in the National Laboratory of Energy and Geology since 2009. He's also executive vice president elected at the European Energy Research Alliance, and vice president of the expert group in resources management at the United Nations, and chair on the UN resources management system in this subgroup. And also Tiago Brandão Rodrigues, as already said, with also a long curriculum. Tiago Brandão Rodrigues is currently the president of the Committee Environment and Energy in Portuguese Parliament. He served as a Minister of Education, Sports and Youth in Portuguese government since 2015 to 2022. He was recently the chair of independent review into the event surrounding 2022 UEFA Champions League final in Paris, and also elected to represent Europe in the UNESCO SDG 4 Education 2030 Committee, and he was a member of the World Anti-Doping Agency's Foundation Board for 3 years. I think the most interesting thing in Tiago, it's also the other part of the researcher and academia profession. Is cancer research in the University of Cambridge. He was a cancer researcher in the University of Cambridge, with relevant contributions in development of imaging methods that can be used in the clinic to detect early tumor responses to treatment. So he had also a PhD in cerebral metabolism and biochemistry. Thanks a lot. Alexandra already introduced you. So after this presentation of Alexandra, as we all know, our main goals in climate neutrality in Portugal, in Europe, is one of the main drivers to tackle global warming and climate change. So Alexandra, with your presentation, I would like to ask, in these 8 billion people in the planet, and expecting 10 billion in the next 15 years, and once that we have energy consumption increasing, number of cities increasing, GDP will increase also, it's necessary a decoupling process, a degrowth, or a sustainable or more sustainable development. I ask this because degrowth is in the table nowadays.
I think that we have another one there. Another one is...
Thank you. That's a very good question, and I think that looking at the example of Europe, what we've seen in the last years is decoupling. So we've been able to maintain the economic growth whilst at the same time reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and reducing the energy consumption. So I think based on these experiences from the past, it should be possible. And then urbanization actually can be a driver rather than an obstacle, because if the cities are designed in a way that is compact and is focused on public transport and transit, if there is no need for a lot of infrastructure, then they can be actually more energy efficient than non-urbanized areas. So I would say that I would believe in decoupling further.
And Teresa, well, one to achieve this neutrality that that we were talking about, energy transition is becoming the most important process nowadays. Also to phasing out the fossil fuels. I would like to ask. We all know also that we cannot live without minerals. I think that it's a common thinking. And in the European Union, we are in the right track with this Critical Raw Materials Act, once that we have to improve in circular economy and to be more independent in terms of these critical raw materials.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the question. I will try to speak out loud to be heard. So the European Union, through the Eurogeo Service, which is the association that groups together all the geological surveys of Europe, and LENEG is one of them, the Geological Survey of Portugal, has been preparing for this act since long ago. We had a common project where within the expert group on mineral resources, where by the chance LENEG was coordinating, we already identified the needs for the raw material needs for the transition. So Eurogeo surveys are the arm of research of the Commission, and we think this Critical Raw Materials Act is very important, specifically the 18th article, where all countries should better know what they have in the country, which raw materials and strategic raw materials they have within the country. We must be aware that in this act, 10% of the materials should be extracted within Europe, and we should not be dependent of any other country more than 60% of raw materials. And in the end, we should recycle 25, I think it was raised to 30%, 25% of the materials we need. A lot of investment is being done, mainly from the European Commission on the recycle side. We participate in several European projects like START and Extract, and to identify which secondary raw materials we can extract from the mining, and also how can we recycle materials in the end of lifetime. Also, new technologies are being developing to diversify the materials that are needed for the transition. And we also, at the Eurogeo Service level, we are developing predictability studies, predictability maps, to guarantee secure and sustainable access to resources. Also, the European Commission, through projects launched, for instance, in Africa, or through projects launched in Latin America, is identifying where the materials are available to supply our needs.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Tiago, first of all, I would like to thank you a lot to come to this panel, because let me say that Tiago arrived like 3 hours ago, and the flight during night.
This
so
is a long day, because you told that we are going to have a long day. We already have a long day because
you started yesterday.
yeah, yesterday.
So let me ask with this introduction first, because if this critical raw materials act doesn't respect environment, nature, communities, even not only identity of the territory, but also the traditions, will not be able to aim this necessary stability climate, and overall we will not be able to avoid pollution. So we know that the Portuguese laws and even the European laws in the framework of European acts are the most demanding in terms of environment and social aspects. And of course, even that we all know that this transition is full of dichotomies, and in some cases nonsense and even extreme argues. Which are the missing pieces that are in the room, in your opinion?
Thank you, George. Thank you very much for the invitation, for being here. I'm very proud for this beautiful and interesting pavilion, and I've just seen some images from my home region, the wind flow project. So it's good that we have here a pavilion. Well, as you know, Portugal has a vast legislation. We are one of the most vulnerable European countries to the climate change. On the other side, we know that we are one of the leaders in the response to the climate challenges. We were the first country to assume 7 years ago, if I'm not wrong, in Marrakesh, the carbon neutrality. And our Prime Minister just announced that we go further, that we want to reach it in 2045. So we have a lot of work to do with this strategic view and a firm commitment with the climate response. And Portugal played a pioneer role, and we have a leadership role in the recognition in legal terms. Our constitution from 1976 has an article about the rights to have an healthy environment. But we need to do much more to that. In the international level, we also have a lot of agreements, and we are doing a lot. And right now we have this framework law, the basic law on climate. And we have key actions, a lot of key actions. So we are doing a lot. But we know that while the Portuguese laws may be relatively strict in terms of environment, but also social aspects, we need to do a lot more. And we know that we need to try to work in the different aspects. One of them is the enforcement and compliance. We always know that even if we have the best law in the world, we need to put it working, and the people need to perceive it as doable. So it's extremely important that we have investment in monitoring technologies and that we are able to follow the laws. On the other hand, we need to integrate our policies, and we need to integrate social, environment, economic policies, and we need to work on them all together. On the other hand, we need to try, and of course, after almost 7 years in the Ministry of Education, public awareness and participation is extremely important, and the way that we are...
With the engagement of the communities. Also.
Exactly, it's extremely important. If they don't feel that the laws speak about them, they are not going to participate, and they are not feel participants on the transformation and on the transitions. And then, of course, we need to try to give and help businesses, communities in this transition, because it's extremely important. And then, of course, long-term planning. We also need to cooperate internationally, and some of the international and multilateral bodies that we belong are essential to this. And of course, we need to build our capacity, forming new generations to participate in this transformation. But of course, the involvement of government bodies, the civil society, it's extremely important to do what we want, to have the best possible laws and at the same time to put them on practice. And it's difficult to match both things, but we need to do that because the legal frame without social and economic practices are almost impossible to make something happen.
The virtual triangle that
Exactly.
we need to. Thank you, Tiago. Jerónimo, since ever, energy is related with resources extraction. Raw materials are playing a really big role in the decarbonization economy model, even industrial or domestic demands. How we are dealing in Portugal with renewables energy supply, comparing with Europe or even in the rest of the world? Are we capable to accelerate these raw materials demand also?
Thank you. Good morning to you all. Thank you, Jorge.
Two questions different.
I'll try to answer both of them. To begin my answer, I just give you some facts about Portugal. These are real facts regarding raw materials. So Portugal is the fourth country in Europe, fourth largest producer of copper. It's the first European producer of zinc. It will be the second European producer of tungsten and the 8th world producer of ornamental stones. And also we have gold, tin, iron, and of course lithium, which is on the top of the agenda. So I would say that Portugal did a lot in the last years. I remind that Portugal started to invest in renewables almost more than 50 years ago. In the 20s and the 30s, Portugal had almost 100% electricity from renewables because we started with hydro. Then, of course, the economy growth, the population growth, and Portugal started with fossil fuels. But since 2000, with wind and now with solar, Portugal is the fifth country in the European Union with the largest share of renewables in final energy consumption. So we did a lot in the last years, but we still have a long way ahead of us. And I think we are on that time where we start to get some difficulties in a way, some troubles in this part. Because in Portugal, and I think all over Europe, is being harder and harder to implement projects. Because we are in that time where what Tiago mentioned and what you mentioned, social acceptance is being harder and harder to tackle. We see all day people demanding us more speed from one side, and in the other side, people demanding us to be more cautious, to look at investments. So what do we really want today? Do you want to move faster? Do you want to really ripple the effects of the transition that this is for us? Because from last decades, a lot of the European countries managed to grow their economies based on fossil fuels, cheap fossil fuels. So I think now it's time for Portugal and for Spain to grow based on cheap renewable electricity. Yeah. So we really need to think on what we want for the country in terms of economic growth based on renewables, and that's what we're trying to do.
In Portugal, I think that it was this month that we were 6 days totally independent in terms of renewable supply.
So imagine that 24 hours, 7 during a whole year. What that could mean for us as country, as for our economy, and for future jobs. So we are on that time where, for us, we are the licensing authority in Portugal, both for mineral resources and energy. And what we see today is that on a local level, it's harder and harder to license and to get the projects done. We have municipalities, and this is a matter of, one, misinformation, both from government side, promoters, and also a matter of local acceptance. We need to share the revenues of these projects with local communities. And for instance, in extraction mineral resources, Portugal has a very recent law that mandates that at least 50% of the royalties are shared with local communities. But they need to know that, and they need to see the effects of that.
How it be implementing.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeronim. Dina, we are in Dubai, and I think that this COP is a really big opportunity to make this shift to achieve neutrality. And you know very well the projects that are running here in Dubai and in general in the country. Is this phasing out a reality? Can we really achieve the phasing out of fossil fuels? And what are the biggest investments that we can assist nowadays for this renewable energy?
Thank you so much. I think the questions that you pose are really, really important. When we talk about phasing out fossil fuels, we have to be also realistic about the timeline. I think you were mentioning do we go faster or do we go better? And I think the answer to that is we go better as well as go faster, because the technologies that are coming up right now to phase out fossil fuels are getting cheaper and are getting easier to acquire and implement. I think one of the things that we are seeing, especially I'll talk about the Middle East, is that there is a real need to diversify the energy mix. And the reason is because we know that fossil fuels are not going to last forever. So there has to be a diversification, one. Two, we have to move away from fossil fuels because we see that the demand for fossil fuels is getting less. This is pure economics. Reduce the demand, reduce the supply. So as the demand goes down, the supply goes down. So the answer to that is yes, we see a real transition towards fossil fuel reductions. We see it not only in the UAE, but we also see it in Saudi, we see it in Egypt and other countries. And then the second question that you were asking is...
About the investments that we can see,
yes.
Some projects, new projects that are running here in Middle East.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's just in the Middle East. I think what's happening is also the investments are being diversified to Latin America. We see investments in Africa to diversify the energy mix, exactly, by the Middle Eastern countries. Again, from a mitigation perspective, we see it, but also from an adaptation perspective, because by having big projects in renewables, you're also creating jobs for communities that need them. Going back to the raw materials, and I think that that's very, very important, we also have to be mindful about when we were talking about mining, we're actually using or extracting double what we are generating when it comes to minerals and materials that we're using. So creating new ways of energy
more efficiently?
Yes, more efficiently will also allow us to generate more and use less of the raw materials that we're using.
Okay, Dina. And Alexandra, only a last question, because I know that you have to leave, because in your presentation, in your approach, is very focused in the importance of energy adaptation to climate change. And nowadays, and until now, this is not an approach that we are used to put in the discussion. You think that the governments and even the private sector are aware that even in the projects of renewable energy, we have to adapt to climate extreme events?
Yeah, thank you. And what we see is really that the substantial climate impacts on energy production. For example, we were just talking before the start of the event about the hydro power and how it might be affected by droughts, but also the transmission of energy, for example, through extreme weather events affecting the electricity cables and so on. What we see is that the governments in Europe are putting an increasing emphasis on the vulnerability of the energy sector. At the European Environment Agency, we receive reporting from the member countries on their national adaptation efforts, and what they do, among others, they look at, they assess how vulnerable different sectors are. And energy is the fourth most affected sector, according to the countries, following after health, agriculture, forestry, and energy and water are sort of ex aequo at the fourth place. And it's sort of before, for example, transport and buildings. So that sort of gives you a bit of a perspective that energy is seen as an important sector. We have some examples of existing adaptations. So in the Climate Adapt platform, we have examples of, for example, French hydropower adapting to the risk of flooding. In Finland, they've been moving cables from overground to underground to make them less vulnerable to extreme weather events. But I think that we might be expecting a step change in the years to come because of the directive that just came into force in January, the Critical Entities Directive, which asks the member countries to identify the critical entities in 11 sectors, and energy being one of them. So the countries will need to identify which elements of the infrastructure are critical to the country functioning. And then design the resilience measures, and climate change is one of the factors that those entities should be resilient to. So that needs to happen by 2026. So I think that we can see an increased interest in the resilience to climate change in the energy sector.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I will have to say goodbye. So thank you very much for inviting me and the discussion.
Thank you, Alexander, and I give a round of applause to Alexander, and thank you to be here today with us. Thank you. Tiago, as you said, in following that Alexander was saying, Portugal is a country that are, with a big impact of climate change. People and communities in a mosaic that Portugal have in terms of territory are really facing already this climate change in terms of...
We are a relatively small country, but we have extreme events of intense rain, severe drought. At the same time, we know that we have huge events related with wildfires, with huge consequences for our infrastructures. And of course, people and communities are the first ones facing these extreme events.
And when we are talking about raw materials projects, and even with these solar investments, for example, they are normally implemented in rural areas, so they are already facing these climate change events. Do you think that it's also difficult to combine these projects in implementing in the areas facing at the same time this adaptation?
It depends. It depends on the way that you implement the projects. It depends on the way that you dialogue with the communities, that you feel that they are really involved. If they feel that if they are part of the solution and they are not facing the problem in their backyard. That's the problem. When they, most of the times, don't know anything about the project, that they have their daily life, and in a given moment, a huge project is in their backyard. So you need to change the way that you organize everything. You need to face the community, tell them that you want to implement, how you are going to implement, why is positive to the local community, how are you going to compensate the community, and then try to have their positive input to the... Of course that it's difficult, and in Portugal right now we are facing that, for example, related to lithium, related to even, for example, the turbines, the wind float project and the offshore eolic energy production. Fishing communities, they feel that you are affecting their territories. And that if you don't speak with them, if you just implement and you don't dialogue with them, of course that they are overreact and that they are not going to be proactively helping the project. They are going to be prioristically against the project. So you need to be careful with this, and we at the parliamentary level, at the governmental level, at the regional, local level, we need to understand that the local communities are the ones that are going to live daily with these projects. So we need to involve them. Otherwise, we are going to have problems, they are going to have problems, and things are not going to work.
And let me also to share one thing about our work in EDM, because we are very proximity to the local communities, and what we felt with the projects of environmental remediation is because the legacy of old mines is very big, and were several years, several decades that state doesn't invest in the recovery areas, in these areas. So we feel some difference when we invest in the environmental remediation, that they really feel that even the legacy that in the other times we already see some naturalization in the projects and so on. It's different. It's like you really said, and thank you for your contribution. Jerónimo, after what Dina said about this demand and supply of raw materials and energy, do you think that even in Portugal we are able to deal with this difference, because we are a middle-sized country, not a small country as normally some Portuguese like to say, but I think that we are a middle-sized country with a lot of resources. Can we contribute to this phasing out?
Well, on the energy side, I would say no. No, because we will for sure increase our energy consumption in the next couple of years. It will be like that. There's no other way, because one simple fact, we will grow, because our economy will grow due to the fact that we will have new industries in Portugal, and these industries will need energy. But this energy will be renewable, so it's a sustainable growth in some way. What we are seeing, for instance, with the hydrogen sector, it will grow in Portugal in the next couple of years. So energy demand will grow necessarily. If we are able to move forward with our lithium mining projects, lithium refining, battery production, we will increase our energy consumption for sure, but it will be renewable energy. Yes. So in the end, our economic growth will also depend on the energy increase.
So in your opinion, we will contribute to the overall, I should say, aim of Paris Agreement, like the Portuguese contribution to be more sustainable as a country. But in terms of raw materials in the battery production, we will consume domestically all of the production.
No, I think we will contribute to the European effort.
Okay.
We already contribute to European efforts in terms of electricity, but we are relatively off of the European market due to interconnection. So we need to find other ways to contribute to this effort, namely through the exports through the sea to the north of Europe. And that's what we are trying to do with, for instance, with the Netherlands, to export green methanol, green ammonia, and in the future green hydrogen to those countries. We are exporting equipment. We have here today some companies that already export equipment for renewables, for hydrogen. We export our engineers that are developing projects in European countries. So we contribute in a lot of ways. And of course, Portugal was one of the first countries to abandon coal. And this is also a great contribution, because we show other countries that it's possible to manage with almost all renewables in our system. So in the end, I think Portugal is like a leader in terms of renewables and ambition to Europe. And just to get back to what Tiago was saying about local engagement. That's one of the biggest struggles that we have now in Portugal. And if we look at past experiences, if we look what happened with wind in Portugal, where local communities received fixed compensation for having those projects in their local communities, I would say almost nobody complained. Because they were able to develop really small communities with the money they received from these projects. So I think one of the main challenges and what we need to really start to think now is how to distribute the revenues with local communities. Without that, this won't change rapidly as we want. And in the mining sector, we have the good examples on the south of Portugal, where local communities embrace these projects because they live with them for so long and they depend on these projects. So I think it's a matter of really engaging with the communities and share with them the real revenues.
Yes, so in a different culture, Dina, can you tell us about your experience like sustainable director in Expo here in Dubai? How it was to implement in terms of energy renewable in a so big event, and how in the future do you think in this era transition could be, I don't know, the next Expo in 10 years with totally sustainable?
I think one of the things I would start with the challenges is the fact that when we were building Expo, we didn't have the right mechanism to integrate renewables into the buildings, for example. We didn't have the mechanisms. We had the solar panels, we had all kinds of things, but there wasn't any mechanisms. I think Expo 2020, and I started with Expo in 2017, we had to create a new way of integrating renewables on a building to the grid, and these mechanisms were quite new. So we learned a lot from utilizing our external knowledge, looking at other countries, looking at other case studies on how to do that, but also how to change the mindset, right? You're still working with different entities, with different communities that have been used to using, fossil fuels. And now you're saying you have to change all of that and you have to think differently. That transition was actually quite fast, but we still had to change the mindset.
To be better, as you said.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, with this question, Teresa, let me only to ask one thing to Jeronim before you, because Dina's said one thing about the grid. So we most of the time it's related also with raw materials because it's copper and other minerals, and grid is normally also in European countries a struggle in terms of to be more to be more faster this transition.
Yeah, grids are currently one of the biggest challenges for renewable deployment. And a recent report from IEA mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken with the number, 1.5 terawatts of projects are stopped because they have no grid connection. And that number doubles for projects that are still in an initial phase. So grid access is a problem throughout Europe, not only in Portugal. And also today it's more and more difficult to deploy grids just with the advent of local impact. So it's a problem not only for materials, but on a licensing level, on the lack of
implementation.
Yes, lack of qualified personnel to implement, because everybody wants to do it at the same time.
It's a bottleneck that we have to. Okay, sure. Teresa, and I left to the final. We are really running out of time, but we know that we also have a map to show about mineral resources in Portugal. But before show that you think that Portugal have future in terms of raw materials projects extraction?
Yes, we have future. First of all, let me say it's just a quick advertising. If you want to go faster or better, please look at our presentation today afternoon because we have tools for that. Yes, Portugal has the capacity, the tools, the scientific knowledge to understand better about its raw materials. We have gained a lot of experience in a project we developed in Angola, and we are in the forefront of geological surveys according equipment and knowledge. So that's just an issue of the government wanting to go to deeper knowledge with the most recent tools, aero transported means without digging to know better.
Aero surveys also and
Yes,
research. Yeah.
yes, without having the need to dig
Geophysics
and
and so
to
on.
be into the geophysics and magnetometrics methods, which will allow to in specific areas know better about our capacities in raw materials, mainly critical raw materials and strategic raw
So
materials.
this is a very recently map that.
So what I show here, you cannot see in detail, but it's the most recent map that was released this month about critical raw materials in Portugal. And we could not show here because it was not the case, but we have areas mapped in more detail where we give the hints to know to dig better the resources we have and to understand better even the reserves we have.
So this map will be in the site of LENEG?
Yes, everything that is raised with public money is free in our geo portal and in our web portal. That's something we make really the point. And every results of our projects are also available if they are not conditioned to some reserve for from companies. Yes.
Well, thank you all. I would like to ask a round of applause to all the panelists that we have here. Some of us really very tired because of the recently flights today. Thanks Tiago, thanks Teresa, Jeronim and Dina to be here. And then we have at 5 o'clock the other event with LENEG that is organizing, also in the Portugal Pavilion.
And we should also thank to you, Jorge.
Okay, thank you a lot. Bye-bye.